Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this evening's Talking About Socialism from a Marxist Point of View Zoom discussion. We're very pleased to have Tina, who is the organizer or one of the organizers of the Why Marx series. This evening, she is going to be giving us a first take on the German elections that took place yesterday. And there'll be plenty of opportunity for you to ask questions, make contributions. Do not hesitate or be afraid or worried about asking questions. There are no silly questions. So I'm going to invite Tina in a few moments just to give a few details of the meeting. First of all, my name is Nick Rack. I'm one of the organizers of Talking About Socialism. I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. We're going to give Tina about 15 or 20 minutes, then we'll open it up for discussion. I'll call Tina back around about 25 to 9 for 10 minutes to reply to the debate, and then we'll just take 10 or 15 minutes for a brief update on the Forging Communist Unity discussions. We had another meeting yesterday. Normally we have contributions. We aim for 3 minutes, but I'll give a bit of leeway, particularly if there's anything controversial. This meeting is going to be, well, it is being recorded now, and it will appear on YouTube tomorrow. If you're watching this on YouTube, please press the subscribe button, and then you'll get notified of other videos as they go up on YouTube. So without that, yesterday we had, yesterday we had the German elections, quite significant developments in terms of the political parties, particularly of the far right. I'm not going to take any of Tina's material, so I'm just going to hand over to Tina. I'll raise my hands when you've got 5 minutes left.
Okie doke. I hope I'll see it. Hi, comrades. Thanks for inviting me. It's going to be a bit difficult to cram this into 20 minutes, but I'm doing my best. Thought I'd share my screen, do a slideshow to have a few things on screen. I'm sure you've all seen oops. Is it still sharing?
Yes.
Oops, I can't see it myself now. There we go. I guess you've all seen the results. It was a huge, massive turnout, 82.5%, which was it's like a second or third highest ever since they started counting, and they do start counting in 45. Very nasty, very contested elections. As you can see from the screen here, it looks like a grand coalition, GroKo, most likely between the CDU, the Conservatives, and the Social Democrats, SPD. But neither of them has that much to celebrate about, really. The CDU did not do as well as expected. They were at about 33% in the polls, and now at 28.5%. And the SPD with 16.4% is the worst result since 1890. Plus, now the last few days of the elections have been dominated by not so much of migration, which was the issue beforehand, but the issue of the Ukraine war, and by extension, the future of the European Union. So this election is so much bigger than what it actually looks here on screen. There's all sorts of issues that will now come up and to be discussed, and which will dominate the news cycle in the next few years, if not more than the news cycle. We'll get to that. So the real winners, of course, were neither the CDU nor the SPD. It was on the left, the Alternative for Deutschland. Here you can see Alice Weidel on the left, Björn Höcke on the right. He's the most right-wing. She's the leader of the AfD. They have dominated politics in Germany really for the last 12 months for sure, and a little bit longer than that, actually. Every single party, except the Linke Party, has moved dramatically to the right in recent months, particularly on the issue of migration because of the AfD. The famous Brandmauer firewall was nothing but hot air, has been upped and has been shifted to the right in record speed. If anybody thought the Greens were in opposition to that, think again. 3 weeks before the election, they published a 10-point plan on how to manage migration, which included some lovely, lovely formulation in terms of you have to check the mental health of asylum seekers, and not in order to treat them properly, but of course to keep them out if they should fail the mental health test. Even inside the Greens, there was huge opposition to that. It was watered down, but they've lost it. They lost it on the issue, and they were punished in the polls. Of course, just as an aside, from capitalism's point of view, this opposition to migration is entirely irrational. Capitalism needs migration. It needs cheap labor, especially with the negative birth rate in Germany. But populism and electoralism trumps that, and individual capitalists and especially petty bourgeois capitalists have jumped onto the anti-migration bandwagon. Here on the right, you can see the other winner of the election, which is the Linke Party with their main candidates, Heidi and Jan. And they've jumped to 8.8 in the polls, almost by accident, it has to be said. They had a couple of splits in the recent months, which actually helped them move a little bit to the left, as I say, almost by accident rather than by design. Firstly, there was the Sarah Wagenknecht split. I'm sure you all heard about Sarah Wagenknecht. She's a populist who set up her own party, Bündnis für Sarah Wagenknecht, because she became quite impatient with the admittedly very, very bad political position that the Linke Party had over Ukraine. They basically supported Zelensky. And of course, that was coupled with a very lack of success of the Linke Party, which was doing so badly, it looked like they would not get back into parliament last year. They were at 3% for many, many years. So she left, and as did a bit later, a dozen or so prominent right-wingers in Berlin, where the Linke was really the main party, government party for some time. They were in government for 7 years, in one coalition or another, and did their best, i.e. their worst, managing capitalism for capitalism, really. They enforced cuts, managed, cut libraries, attacked workers, etc., etc. The typical behavior of going into government, to help people, but you end up attacking them within this period. So that their departure was no surprise, was orchestrated around anti-Semitism. Of course, it's big in Germany, the false charges of anti-Semitism. It's the Palestine movement is not quite as big in Germany as it is here, not quite as strong. It has historic reasons, which we can get into if you like. But anti-Semitism has been used against the left for sure. The Linke, in fact, although it has moved a little bit to the left, has just expelled a famous member who was accused of celebrating Hamas on October the 7th. It's as much rubbish as it is when they attack us here on this issue. Nevertheless, the departure of both Sarah Wagenknecht and those right-wingers in Berlin has allowed the party to move to the left a little bit. They're not fighting for open borders on migration, etc., but they are the only party who will say there's nothing wrong with migration. We should defend the right to asylum. It's mainly based around, it's a bit more realistic, etc. As I say, it's not about, defend the right, the principle for open borders, for example, but they are the best of a bad lot. And they stuck out like a sore thumb with that position. Here you can see this is quite interesting. This was an election. It's a traditional thing in Germany that under 18s, who are of course not allowed to vote in the national elections, they can go to youth elections, and they actually go properly to the polling booth, and they put their vote in, etc. And amongst them, the Linke really shot up. Party number one, AfD, is in 5th place, and the Greens are in 6th place even, because a lot of Green members have joined the Linke recently. A lot of SPD members have joined the Linke recently. They've gone up from 50,000 people 50,000 members in 2022 to around 80,000 members now. Many of them joined in the last couple of months. With this new influx of members and the departure of some of the right wingers, not all the right wingers, it has to be said. There's plenty of right wingers, realos still in the Linke Party, but they have been able to, they didn't get so much kickback from, for example, sticking up against arms support, arms deliveries to Ukraine. So they now have a firm position against arms deliveries to Ukraine. The political position is still a bit wishy-washy. It has to be said, it's very anti-Russian, in solidarity with the Ukrainian people, etc., which, there's per se nothing wrong with it. But it took them till now to come out with a firm opposition to arms deliveries to Ukraine. They've also stopped their position of unconditional solidarity with Israel, which they had. And they have, for the first time ever, and I was a member 20 years ago, for the first time ever, they've come out and said, we don't want to be part of a government. And I can't stress how important that shift is for the Linke, where it was like, of course, if you stand, if you stand in elections, you must be prepared to be responsible and stand for government. This is the first time ever they didn't do that, which is quite interesting. There will be a few more left-wing MPs now. Ferhat Koçak is one to keep our eye on. He's a pro-Palestinian campaigner, and I'm told quite principled. I actually don't know him, but others tell me he's quite good. Some of the worst MPs, Jan Korte and Petra Pau, they have left the Bundestag, but there's still enough right-wingers there. There will be a pull to the right on the Linke, it has to be said. Despite those few changes to the left, I would not be surprised if they change to the right again pretty damn soon, especially now they look like a success. There will be right-wingers joining them soon as well, and there will be another pull to the right. So it's not a done deal that they will now always move left. As an aside, the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, which some comrades of you might know, that looks like it's saved and will provide food and rent money for a whole generation of Marxists who depend on the foundation to, finance their translation work, etc. This is from the actual election results, and here you can see under 25-year-olds on the left and 60 and older on the right. So there's a huge difference in most parties. So amongst the under 25s, the Linke clearly won as well. So not just in the student population who's not allowed to vote yet, but also young voters. Although the AfD is also doing quite well. Who's doing not so well is the Sarah Wagenknecht Bündnis, as you can see. So even amongst young people, they're only getting 6%. And that brings me, so this is just a graphic to show how the Linke has attracted particularly votes from the Green Party. As you can see, 700,000 votes from the Green Party went to the Linke, and 560,000 votes from the Social Democrats went to the Linke. A few went to the AfD and Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht. But in general, it was clearly disappointment with the SPD and Greens that increased the vote for Die Linke. Talking about losers, here she is, Sarah Wagenknecht. She's, it made me laugh when I saw the result, I have to say. 4.972% for the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht. You probably all know that in Germany you have to reach 5% to get into parliament. There's ways around it, but you have to win 3 directly elected MPs, but they didn't manage that. She is one of the most cleverest people you will ever see in chat shows. She wipes the floor with her opponents. She is a very, very sharp person, which is why I don't believe she actually meant any of the crap she's come out in within the last few months. So she runs the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, very self-centered, you could say. Calling your party after yourself is a bit much, perhaps, but it does say a lot about her. She tried to ape, basically, after she left the Linke Party, she tried to set up a George Galloway type organization. Really, it's got very similar politics. It's all about capitalism in Germany has to be supported, and it sort of trickles down to the little people. It's all about the German industry, which we'll have to save, everything that is good for all of Germany. There are no classes in Germany. We're all in it together, sort of a red-brown nationalist a program similar to that of George Galloway. And in the last few weeks of the election campaign, when she started off, when she set up the party, they were at about 20% in the polls. So she thought she had it made. Went down continuously. And then in the last few weeks, she was at about 6%, 7%. And she thought, oh, I'll do a last push. And she demanded that there should be a national referendum on migration with the aim to reduce migration. And we're not even talking asylum seekers, we're talking also immigration from 500,000 to 50,000. And she demanded a national referendum, which she knows is not even in the constitution, the possibility to do that. So it was a total PR stunt, a really nasty PR stunt, and it really backfired. The party voted with the Conservative Party and the AfD on this famous anti-migration bill, anti-asylum bill that led to a lot of hoo-ha a couple of weeks ago. She's now considering legal action against the result because there are 260,000 Germans who live abroad, and some of them have not received their ballot paper in time. And she thinks, oh, that's, because they weren't allowed to vote, the whole election should maybe be declared illegal. I think she lives in a very false hope there because, just think it through. Germans who have consciously moved abroad from Germany, are they more or less likely to support a nationalist populist party in Germany? Well, I'm for one, I certainly would not vote for the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, not after she's quite moved so much to the right. So then, what is this? What is the AfD? Is it a fascist organization? Are we witnessing the rise of fascism, not just in Germany, but across Europe? I have no doubt there will be proto-fascists among the AfD, as there are with Meloni in Italy, etc., etc. But, are there 20% of Germans fascists? 20% of Germans racists even? I suspect not. And if we look at the classic definition of fascism, you would have thought, you need a strong working class. Historically, that's what happened with fascism, as there was a strong working class, an unresolved revolutionary situation, and the capitalism couldn't run society in the old way, the capitalist elites, and they had to turn to fascist gangs and demagogues in the attempt to save itself, and turning to militia, setting up militias, etc., etc. None of that is happening in Germany. There's no revolutionary situation. The left, apart from the Linke is 8%, left is nowhere. So this is not fascism in the traditional sense. I'm not saying that they are not right-wing populists and we have to oppose them, etc., etc., and they will make life very, very miserable, Trump, etc., for migrants. No doubt, but I think we have to be careful how we describe them. I think they're dangerous right-wing populists, but perhaps not fascists. Yes,
on the 5 minutes to go, Tina.
Oh, right. Better hurry up then. So on the surface, it was about migration and very unpleasant with it. But I also think we have to look at the economy and the support for a pointless war in Ukraine as a crucial part of why the AfD has done so well. And these two issues are very much connected. Billions of taxpayers' money has been pumped into the Ukraine war. It's the biggest financial supporter in Europe, globally, number 2 after the US. They were foregoing cheap gas from Russia consciously, watching on as the CIA bombed the Nord Stream pipelines, and coupled with higher interest rates and falling demands for German exports. This has really put the German economy into a really bad situation. There's been since COVID, almost 250,000 manufacturing jobs have been lost, and a recession is now not just likely, but almost certain. So capitalism is an international decline, with the stagnating global economy aiding the rise of irrationality and the fear of the other. And I think this is the kind of fertile ground that we have to understand the rise of the populist right with. It's what Marx called alienation from our system. It explains why The AfD, for example, did particularly well in East Germany. Oops, I've jumped over it. Here, you can see that the AfD on the right here, directly, that's where they won the constituencies. On the left, the black is the CDU and with the CSU. So they were particularly did well in East Germany, where there's still ideologically, a sense that we've lost in the unification. We've lost out to West Germany, etc. Alienation is huge in that area in particular. This year, this is an interesting one as well. How do you assess the economic situation in Germany? As you can see, 83% think the economic situation is bad, which is it. And here are votes of people who consider themselves in a bad economic situation. You can see the votes for the AfD going through the roof. These are people, so people have voted for the AfD who see themselves as the ones at the bottom, the losers of reunification, the losers of neoliberalism going wrong, etc. A couple of final words then. Hold on a second. Here. A couple of final words then, because to hurry this along. Both governing parties now who will be in government, the CDU and the SPD, have used the last few days before the elections to underline that they will continue their support for the Ukraine war. Pay to the last man, the last penny, etc. After all, in Germany, as Germany especially went through hell to support Zelensky, simply giving in to Trump now and pulling out of Ukraine war would make the new government look like a total pushover and make the sacrifices of the last 3 years entirely pointless, which of course we know they were. But for the government, this is a very tricky situation to be in now, where King Donald is rewriting all the rules in an attempt to hold on to US hegemony at the expense, amongst other, the EU. I think he was supporting the AfD and similar parties, yes, with an ideological aspect to it, but also it's about making Europe weak again, not strong again, great again, weak again. The AfD wants to leave the European Union, dismantle it, and abolish the euro. So there will be pressure from other EU countries too to continue support for the Ukraine war, even if it's just a way to justify the existence of the European Union itself, which is now in the crosshairs of Trump. He clearly wants to do away with the EU and make it as weak as possible. Now, will the European Union stand up, and Germany's role in this will be hugely important. Will they continue the Ukraine war against the wishes of Trump? Will they even be pushed perhaps into reviving that old idea of a European government with a real European army? I mean, that would set up a clear and potentially very dangerous confrontation with the US government. At first economic, of course, but we know that war and peace are really never far apart in such unstable times. They're just different sides of the same coin. So within Germany, though, pursuing the war in Ukraine will also not go down well, especially those who support the AfD, who were the most outspoken in their opposition to the war. So there is a lot of tension at the moment, and just to sum up the final summing up, the European powerhouse, Germany, the European powerhouse, it's now become the European powder keg, and in these unstable political times, almost anything can happen quite quickly, and it is quite worrying. We should be, welcoming the Linke success without illusions. I think it's a good sign, that there is life on the left, and it's good they've stuck with the left positions, but there will be a pull on the right on them. But if we were in Germany, I would now definitely rejoin the Linke, as opposed to the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, which you can't actually join. You can't become a member yet. You have to tell them you're interested, and then let you know if you're allowed to join or not. I tried. But the Linke allows political platforms, which is quite unusual for a mass. And is it a mass party? 80,000. It allows permanent factions, basically. They've tried to do away with it a few times, the right, but you can still, there's a Marxist faction. You can organize with other comrades. You can put out publications and argue openly for your idea. So there will be a pull to the right, but it is it is a possibility for socialists to get involved again. And now it's in parliament that will allow certain things to go forward and make the voice heard of socialists. I'll leave it there. Sorry, I probably was longer.
No, Tina, that was great. Thank you very much. A really good broad sweep of the developments, showing the growing instability at the heart of Europe and the shifting sands in terms of international relations. And I think from my point of view, particularly interesting and welcoming and promising is the number of young people that voted for Die Linke. But anyway, let's open it up to the floor. Please indicate straight away, don't hold back. And so I've got Edmund, followed by Matthew Jones, and then I'll see who else wants to come in. Remember, if you've got questions, even if they're short, do ask them. This is the opportunity. So Edmund.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks very much to Tina as well. That was really excellent introduction. I wanted to ask two questions really about where it leaves Die Linke as a party and the left more broadly. Firstly, in respect of the fight against chauvinist ideas and anti-migrant ideas within the left, it's hard not to feel a certain Schadenfreude Sarah Wagenknecht missing out so narrowly on getting into the Bundestag. But I think there were 3 state level elections last year, all of them in former East German states, and her party did well in all of them, I think, and in one of them, I think, it inflicted quite a significant defeat on Die Linke. It might have been Brandenburg, but I'm sure Tina can tell us. So where does that leave the sort of divided left and Sarah Wagenknecht's attempt to split the left and siphon off support, because she's missed out on the Bundestag, but it's not, of course, not the whole story, because she clearly has quite strong state level support, particularly in some areas of Germany where perhaps support for anti-migrant ideas is running higher right now. And the second question, I suppose, flowing from that is, Tina made reference to Die Linke saying for the first time that they didn't want to be in government as an outcome of this election. And of course, this election is at the federal level, but below that, Germany has 16 state level governments, and in several of those, Die Linke has, as Tina said, participated for many years as a coalition partner, a governing party, and taken part in implementing austerity programs while in state level government. So I would just be interested to hear Tina's thoughts about how the shift that you identified in terms of attitude towards governing at a federal level, how that might be reflected in arguments within Die Linke about whether they should govern at a state or a local level, and if so, how, what should the red lines be, what's their attitude to implementing cuts and austerity. And so, yeah, two sort of areas of struggle there, I guess, for the left. It would be interesting to see how you think that goes forward from this election.
Thanks very much, Ed. Matthew.
All right, thank you. Thanks, comrades. Thanks to Tina. That's very interesting, obviously, as an initial view of what's going on. I think there's obviously sort of loads of things that come out of this. I mean, as she points out, the state of the German economy. I mean, it's sort of like the destruction of Nord Stream which is the key, energy asset in the whole of Europe, effectively supplying cheap Russian gas to the rest of Europe, and particularly Germany. The destruction of that by the US is like the bonus, isn't it? The Ukraine war. They can actually flatten the German economy as a sort of byline for running a war against Russia via the Ukraine proxy. And the thing is, the Germans didn't even protest. They were too frightened to protest about it. It's unbelievable. So that is really one of these things. As you say, I mean, obviously the rundown of German industry as a result is extraordinary. I mean, okay, the general crisis of industrial crisis across the world, but obviously sharpened up in Germany in those terms. I mean, the other thing about the AfD, of course, is that much of their leadership and leading figures are actually the grandchildren of leading Nazis. It's quite extraordinary to look at it. I mean, how people don't pick out, this as a suspect formation, as you say, in terms of like a frustration with we kick the system vote, which is obviously what we're seeing many places, and we'll see it here as well with reform and so on and so forth, despite how despicable they are. But also what we've seen, I think, is a volatility. And I mean, as far as I can see, as far as I've seen, there's been quite big demonstrations against fascism and so on, and against the AfD, against racism. And obviously, there's a section of the society, and particularly, obviously, the youth, who are looking for an expression of that politically. And they've gone to Die Linke because, I mean, precisely because Die Linke has actually moved its position, and given that possibility, I think, and Zara Wagner has been so awful in terms of basically being racist and anti-migrant and so on. And Die Linke have occupied that space, although not by, it appears, not just they stumbled into it because but that's what's given them the position they've got. In terms of the Palestine movement, I mean, the other thing, the thing is, I mean, obviously it's happening everywhere. The repression is happening everywhere. I mean, I was in the Sheriff Court in Glasgow today as we bung up the legal system ever more. But in Germany, of course, you've seen really horrible thing. I mean, the cops have gone crazy and just arrested all sorts of people. With much violence in the street, and absurd things like the Berlin with the conference last year, which they shut down by pulling the plug on the electricity and attacking everybody. The cops informing the Jewish organisers they were in fact anti-Semitic, which is sort of typical, really. But and then of course recently, I think in the last week or two, the Berlin cops informing people that they couldn't chant in Arabic or play Arabic songs in a demonstration in Berlin. That wasn't allowed. That's illegal. Which is just, I mean, it's really getting to the point, but it's the whole thing in terms of the imperialist ruling classes attempting to suppress that movement, because it poses such strong questions in terms of the function of imperialism and the continuation, and the fact that obviously that the entirety of the German ruling class is completely committed, and all the German politicians, as here in fact, but probably worse in Germany, because obviously they supply many more weapons to Israel than Britain does, completely committed to Israel and everything Israel has ever done. That's a reason of state. The German state is completely committed to Israel and will allow no form of dissent on that question. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Matthew. I've got Lawrence Parker, followed by Anne McShane.
Hi, Tina. Yeah, thank you for that. I'm not an expert on Germany, so I'd rely upon your superior knowledge for most of it. But I wondered if you could expand upon one thing I have picked up on, partly through subbing articles for the publication that I work on, is the level to which the Green Party has shifted to the kind of right, and you kind of alluded to the fact that maybe Die Linke made some inroads into the left vote of the Greens on the back of that. I wondered if you could expand on that, because it does seem to, because when I've been sat and read about the German Greens who've occasionally come across my path, as I say, and just kind of in the form of me working on articles and stuff, and I've kicked up the odd comment. I've been obviously I know the Greens have that tendency to go to the right and to go to the establishment kind of right. But some of the things I've actually been reading from Green spokesmen in Germany on immigrants have been absolutely disgusting. And there still is in this country a kind of halo around the Green Party as being left wing, and it comes up quite a lot I've read recently people advocating that we need to get involved in the Green Party, and we need to have we need to organize within the Green Party. But there's very little perception ever of what the Euro Greens have kind of done when they've been close to power, or that they've been part of administration. So I wondered if you could expand upon that. And just very finally, I think the kind of idea that I think you have to be careful with the AFD if we make statements like Matthew just did, which is like the AFD, obviously, their grandparents were Nazis. Well, I'd have thought there'd be quite a lot of people, first of all, whose grandparents were Nazis or involved in the Nazi party or whatever in Germany. And I don't think it's a particularly new phenomenon in Germany of like right-wing nationalist politics from kind of ex-Nazis, as I understand. Tina would know about this better than I do because I don't really know the history that well. But in West Germany, I understand that there was always a big scandal about the amount of ex-Nazis that had got jobs and the amount of these kind of nationalist right-wing politicians. But there's a question of whether they're fascist or not in that situation. I think it's a completely kind of different matter. I only know it more from reading history about the changes in German history down the years. There was a huge school in Germany after the Second World War of right-wing historians who were nationalist and who wanted to defend Germany's kind of role in the war. But I wouldn't say that all of those were fascist historians. They in the sense that they had an idea of a kind of new Germany playing a role alongside the US and NATO against the historic enemy of Russia. I think we have to be very careful using this fascist kind of label because it just implies too much, and often it's being read off quite weak evidence and things that aren't, just as Tina says, what would be the point of the German ruling class employing a fascist regime at this point? There's no working class threat on the horizon. What would be the point? What would be the idea behind that? That's it. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Lawrence. Anne.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Thank you, Tina. So following up on Lawrence's point there, which I think is an important point to make, I was reading Julia Damphouse's report in Jacobin on the way home from work. I'm still in my coat in my kitchen here. And well, she's very enthusiastic about how well Die Linke has done. But she said that the percentage of the vote for the anyway, the percentage of vote for the right, I don't remember whether it was AFD or the Sarah Wagenknecht Bund, but that the percentage was something like 37%, so that the percentage of working class votes for Die Linke was 8%. So that's, in line with the overall percentage, but it shows that they haven't got a large percentage of working class votes in there. And at the meeting at the Communist Forum yesterday, Tina, you said that many of the votes for the AFD were coming from East Germany, and that previously the Die Linke had a strong vote there. So clearly there's been some shift. And also I think that we have to bear in mind that blaming the migrants has become common sense politics now. Like here in Ireland and in Britain, I'm sure it'll be the case that because of people's desperation for housing in particular and the lack of housing, and in Ireland the government's deliberate blaming of migrants more and more for the lack of resources, that it's like look after our own first. So the fact that Die Linke went against that trend is excellent. I think that there are lots of problems with Die Linke still. I mean, Tina said that they've got better on Israel-Palestine, and I'd be interested to know more about that. believed that the influence of the anti-Deutsch movement has been strong in Die Linke, but I still think that the struggles within the working class are far from over, especially if the polling from within the working class was as strong as is suggested, and I think that exhibits a desperation rather than necessarily signing up to every single notion that the AFD would have. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Anne. Minnie, and just before Minnie comes in, can I just encourage other people who might have questions or thoughts that they want to express to put them together and put your hand up? So, Minnie, thanks.
Yeah, I just want to say, of course, the guy who's going to be Chancellor, is he called Merz, for the CDU? They're calling him BlackRock's man, just like we have a leader here who is also a BlackRock man, Starmer. I think Merz, he was legal counsel for a big lobbying firm, and he increased the amount of shares owned by BlackRock in German business, like Volkswagen, Siemens, etc. He's capital's man, isn't he? Just like all our leaders are. And it's global, where like the left needs to go global. The communist left needs to go global. They've already gone global. I think he agreed. He has been a large part of the German economy failing, because didn't he agree with the closure of the Nord Stream pipeline? And also he was representing companies that were asset stripping, buying up German companies, asset stripping, getting rid of jobs, etc. So poor old Germany and poor old all of us, really. Good to hear that Die Linke has changed and increased its vote share. Are we allowed to talk about, are we going to have a slight discussion on the communist unity, or
Yes,
can we just make a couple of comments now?
No, Ed's going to give a brief introduction at 1:45.
Okay, so will there be time for comments on that?
Hopefully.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Minnie. All right. I'm going to, if there's nobody else got their hand up, I'm going to invite Tina back to respond to some of those. And whilst that's happening, I'm sure that there are quite a few phrases and references that have gone over the head of people. Certainly, I've had to think about them. So if you've got questions and you want more explanation, do come in when Tina's dealt with the questions that we've had so far. Tina, do you want to come back on the points that have been raised, and then we'll open it up for a few more questions?
Yep. Good question. Good contributions. Ed, yeah, the BSW does well in East Germany for sure. Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht. So it used to be like the vote for the Linke was quite massively different. In the east of Germany, it was like 25-30% occasionally, and in the west it was like 1 or 2% for many years. That's sort of evened out, really, but with the BSW it is still like that. I think that has to do with the fact why the AFD is so strong in East Germany as well. It's parties who will speak out against those above, them above, what they're doing to us. So there's, as I mentioned, there's a sense of being the loser on the losing side is still very, very strong in East Germany, not always 100%, because of justified with the economic situation. On paper, it looks quite similar now, but there is a sort of a feeling that we've been done by, and I think that's still very strong. And so anti-establishment parties like the AFD, like the BSW will do very well. And it has to be said, every time the AFD gets called fascist scum, or every time they're being sued, and the German establishment has tried their hardest to sue, anybody they can related to the AfD for this and that. And sometimes they're successful in suing them successfully. And what happens is they grow in the polls some more because, the German establishment, which we hate, is suing these bastards. So there must be something right with them, turning them into martyrs. And yeah, I don't, I agree with Lawrence's criticism of what Matthew said. My grandparents were Nazis. And I'm telling you a secret now, my granddad was in the SS when he was 15. He was recruited to the SS in the last days of the war. So bloody what? It doesn't explain what I'm doing. It doesn't explain very much. So there are some nutters and there are some people in the AfD who see themselves as fascists, etc. But, consider this, 20% of the population in Germany voted for these fascists. Are they all, victims of fascists? Are they all fascists themselves? Are they all not able to understand that these are the bad guys and stuff? Why do 20% of the population vote for them? I think that's a crucial thing we have to understand and even try to work out what's happened there. They're not all fascists. I would say they're not even all racists. Not even a large percentage of them are. They consider themselves victims of an increasingly brutal capitalism. If we had any organization, if we were stronger than we were, we'd be recruiting them. We'd be giving them answers that they find attractive. But in the current situation, as it is, the answers of the right are much easier to swallow, are supported by Donald Trump, man, and Elon Musk, the richest man on the planet. Must be something to it. And our leaders, that Olaf Scholz fella, etc., they don't like him. So, I like him if those, liberal bourgeois, people who've been messing us about the last few years don't like him. I like him. So we have to understand that they're not just, putting a label on them as fascists or Nazi supporters is just totally counterproductive. These are, we have to understand why 20% look to those answers, and we shouldn't write them off, not at all. I think we can win them over. We should be able to win them over. Can the Linke win them over? Maybe. I think they're in a better position now than they've been for many, many years. There is a pull, and as Anne touched upon, the anti-German pull is still there. It's a funny kind of thing how things develop with the anti-Semitism smear campaign, because it did start in Germany many years ago, 15 years ago, with the anti-German trend, which is basically pro-Israel. We cannot criticize anything about Israel because we're Germans, and Germans have this historic guilt of causing the Holocaust, etc. So, if you ever if you ever say anything about critical about Israel, you're an anti-Semite by definition. Anti-Germans, I mean, what a stupid label to put on yourself if you're in Germany. So anti-German means pro-Israel, basically. And they became quite an important trend within Die Linke. There were huge debates, huge battles, and the anti-Germans, they had won at some stage, declaring, the position of the Linke became pro-Israel, and not criticizing anything Israel does, etc. It still has a two-state solution, and it still has a terrible view in terms of the conflict. It's two sides, there's bad apples on both sides, and you can solve it with two states. Absolute rubbish. So they have a lot of weaknesses. Individual politicians like Heidi Reichenicke, who's the leader, she's not as bad, and it's again this trend, with new influx of more lefty members, there will be pressure on them to solidify a decent position on Palestine, but so far they're crap. The Linke is crap, as is the Sarah Wagenknecht alliance on Israel. They both have very bad positions. Sarah Wagenknecht, has to be said, I mean, she did, she used to be quite good on Palestine, and there was a big scandal when the Israeli president at the time, was it Werner Herzog, I think, visited the Bundestag, the parliament, and everybody, you have to get up and stand. And she sat down like that, huge in the media everywhere. She's refusing to show him the honor, etc. I mean, she didn't boo him or anything, which, I would have done, but even that not getting up was a huge thing at the time. She won't do that anymore. She's been totally quiet on the issue of Palestine, Israel, because that's so disputed in Germany and so controversial, and it would cost you votes. So she's become such an opportunistic, horrible person. Yeah, I mean, so that pull will be on the left party. I mean, and it really needs a split. It needs to do away with those who want to run government, etc. And yeah, just on Ed's question, I've looked it up quickly while we were online. They are in government in two areas at the moment as we speak, in Bremen and in Mecklenburg. So that was a national thing. We want to be in opposition nationally. Regionally, yeah, why not? We can help things along. Again, though, this vote and understanding, if they do understand it, that a lot of the vote will have come from people who support their opposition stance, not getting into government. Perhaps that will add pressure on them regionally as well and locally, not to pursue government posts at all costs, and that's what they've done in the past. So it's still going on. There will, and they're still in government in two regions, as I said. Oh yeah, Green Party. I mean, it's bizarre if anybody thinks they're on the left. I did a little poll myself, asking friends and colleagues in Germany, and I can't quite understand, but people who are have respect for on a personal level still think the Greens are they are the opposition. And Robert Habeck is the guy who was the candidate, the main candidate. And he was quite good in the media and stuff. I think he came over quite well, etc. But for the last 2-3 years, I mean, they have been the strongest pro-war party in parliament. It was them who pushed the coalition into the war, into properly supporting the war. Olaf Scholz, who is now being blamed with, the economy going down the pan, he is to a degree as well, of course. But it was the Greens who pushed him into, sending weapons and sending loads of money and becoming Europe's biggest financial supporter of the Ukraine war. It was the Green Party, Annalena Baerbock. She's, she could join the CDU tomorrow and you wouldn't know the difference. So on the Ukraine war, they're even worse than they are on migration, it has to be said. So on migration, they used to be, mealy-mouthed as well. I mean, you'll probably know that the British Green Party had until recently a program for reducing the population to something like 30 million, which is, of course, Green Party program. You have to live in balance with nature in general. That's nothing wrong with that. But if it means, reducing the population by over half, 60-70%. I mean, there's clearly issues how to do it. Of course, you start with migration, and that is, of course, the basis of the green thought, isn't it? You can't have too many people living there, so being anti-migrant comes quite naturally and has historically been deep greenism is always very close to eugenics and to reducing numbers of people. So the anti-migration viewpoint comes quite natural, and it did to Robert Habeck, who presented a 10-point plan that he had to half withdraw then because of the pressure from inside the Green Party, but the damage was done, and quite rightly too. So they still have an image. I find it hard to believe as well, but the Green Party comes from Germany. That was where it was launched, wasn't it? In 40 years ago. And that there were, they played a huge role with changing the whole narrative around green issues, and they did put two fingers up to the establishment for a long time, etc. But so they have still that little bit of image, but not with young people. Clearly, they've totally fucked it now with the younger generation. Thank God, and they maybe younger people are looking again for socialist answers, for actual answers that deal with the system as a whole and not just the bits of the system, which is of course what the Green Party has been doing. But this is a period where big answers are clearly in demand, easy answers from Trump, yeah, but big answers to answer the big questions of where the hell is the world going at the moment. It's all in such flux. So there is some space for the left if it considers its principled politics and pursues them without trying to subordinate itself to the right in order to govern an ungovernable system at the moment. I mean, who would want to govern Germany at the moment? Dear God.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Tina. I'm going to call you back again after we've got a few more hands that have gone up. So I'm going to call in Gary, and then I'm going to call in Soraya, and then Matthew has got his hands up. So maybe we'll have a little bit of controversy, which is always good. So, Gary. What's happened? Gary, is he still there?
Yep. Yep.
Soraya.
He's still there, but I don't know whether he's got a poor thing. Yes, I was just going to ask a question. So where did the youth vote go, if you're able to say that? If you can see where the youth voted. It doesn't for us when I say from the outside, I mean I think most of the people in this meeting tonight are experienced socialist communist activists, but it's where are the youth looking, and because of course if we were in Germany, we'd be wanting to go towards where the workers are looking and where they are involved, but also young people. Obviously, young people are part of the working class as well, but really, where are they directing their views, and is it that they have illusions in the Greens, despite the role the Greens have played in the past? Because, of course, again, it might not be something that's obvious necessarily to young people, that the role they played in local government and so forth. I just don't know.
Thanks, Soraya. Tina, is it correct that the youth vote, the 18 to 25-year-olds, pretty much across the board got the highest vote of any party?
Will I show it again quickly?
Yeah, please.
Put it on screen here. So yes, the Linke did best, 25% of under fives. So on the left-hand side, you've got the under 5-year-old.
Under 25.
Under 25, yeah. On the left, and on the right, you've got 60 and older. So amongst the under 25, you've got 25% for Die Linke, but also 21% for the AfD. Greens 10, meh, and BSW also 6%. So Linke by far the biggest. And I showed this earlier. This is also good. This is this unofficial vote of younger under 18. So amongst them, look how badly the Green Party did. These are people who are, this is the next generation. They're going to be able to vote soon. So Linke way ahead, SPD, and then others. Others are the third biggest. So there's a couple of other parties like the Pirates and stuff standing, and then the Greens last, which is quite interesting.
Thanks, Tina. I'm going to ask Matthew to come in.
Okay, thanks, comrades. No, a few more questions. The thing about the Greens, of course, is they actually originate. I think the original Greens in the 80s and 90s, of course, were of the 68 generation. So you had a chunk of the left who went to the Greens, and it was all built around the anti-nuclear movement and so on and so forth. And now it's extraordinary. The idea of green warmongering is just unbelievable. I mean, some of the stuff that Baerbock's come out with is crazy, and her sort of lunatic Zionism and joy at genocide is just it's horrible. An extraordinary example. I think the other thing it would be interesting is if you could give us a brief notion of what the factions are within Die Linke. I mean, I know there's a whole bunch of different ones, and as you say, and a bunch of people have left, which I mean, hopefully shifts, as you say, shifts to balance the left. But it'd be interesting to see if you give us a bit more detail on that. The other thing that really also, of course, is the question of the unions, because I mean, Germany's always historically had very strong unions. At the moment, of course, what you're looking at is the destruction of large chunks of industry, particularly obviously the car industry, possibly and chunks of the shut-in of much of whole chunks of German industry, down to obviously particularly heavy industry, steel, and then looking at cars and all the rest of it. And also, of course, fights and things like the railways. I mean, because the program of the government, of course, is to destroy and privatize these things. So I mean that will be interesting as well. What do you see from the unions? Thanks.
Thanks very much, Mike. I'm going to call in Mike Belbin in a moment, but I've just a couple of questions, Tina, in the sidebar. I'll read them out. Gary wasn't able to come in because of his IT problems. He says, my question is, how does Merz expect to position Europe as an alternative to NATO military? And also, how could they keep the war going in Ukraine without the US? Saraya asks, are the pirates a reference to the Edelweiss pirates, the youth resistance under the Nazis? I'm going to ask you if you could just expand a little bit more on the economic and social decline that fuels the search for an alternative that has ended up with the far right, particularly why that is so exaggerated in the East, so the former East Germany. And just make this observation myself. I agree with what comrades have said about not throwing one blanket over the whole of the vote or the electorate for the far right. When you see a party like the AfD getting 20% of the vote, it must be extremely petrifying for immigrants, of people of color. And my explanation is that when you've got social economic crisis and all the parties seem to be doing the same thing, so the CDU-CSU or the SDP have shared government almost, one tit for tat since the Second World War. They are responsible for the problems that are faced by the German working class. In the absence today of any authoritative left, and in the absence of something like the Russian Revolution and the Communist International as existed in the 20s and the 30s, as an alternative, progressive, positive, systemic change, it seems inevitable that working class people who are at the bottom of the heap are looking for something different and end up falling prey to the easy answer that it's the immigrants that are to blame. And until we on the left really get our explanation, our answer out there on this by building big, strong communist organizations, we're going to have a very, very hard job of winning back those workers from that easy dead end. Mike, your point, please.
Yeah, I hope it's not redundant. Tina, you mentioned yesterday when I was listening to you speak so well yesterday that over 25s, that is directly between 25s and 30-year-olds, are voted for the AfD, which shows shifting within the electorate. And I totally agree with you. That is the psychology of the electorate and how bits shift for whatever reason. is a key element. Many of the people who are voting for AFD, like perhaps for reform, the Reform Party here, are not racist and fascist. They are anti-elitist. Now, if the left could, appeal to that, that would be very useful. I also like your characterization of the Greens, the best one I've heard, how they went from international environmentalism to a national chauvinism, saying, well, the problem is overpopulation, and we can get rid of that by excluding migrants, etc. But the one thing the election does show is the shifting of votes to what you might call anti-elitist parties like the Linke and also AFD, which probably is a bit of hope, as long as we can, appeal to that psychology, to those vague demands. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mike. Tina, a few more questions there, and any points that you left over. I'm afraid now you've only got 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Yeah, thanks for that, Conrad. Yeah, I should have put that in that's right, the category between 25 and 38. The AFD was #1, which is very worrying. I didn't have a graphic for it. I read it out in the meeting, but I should have looked for one. But yeah, I agree with you. Anti-elitist, putting two fingers up to the establishment mainly, and why are they so popular, and especially in the East? It's a number. I think it's like almost a perfect storm happening at the moment. You had a hangover from the reunification, which was put on people in East Germany. They clearly lost. There was no reunification. They were tacked on to Western Germany. It was made very clear that that's how the power dynamics are going. So there is an ongoing sense of being done by the West, but then coupled with real economic, not just stagnation, but recession. A recession is now very, very likely. We could, discuss this. Does it really matter in the sense from a Marxist point of view of the economy always grows, but of course it comes with real effect on real people, on people's real lives. So prices have risen massively throughout. Even I'm going to Germany 2-3 times a year, and I can see how it jumps up massively every time I'm going. Everything's become hugely expensive. Energy prices have doubled in a year. Inflation is very high. I don't have the number there, but I know it's been high. Part of a global capitalism in decline, so you got the real economic problems, but then look around. I mean, where is the world going? There are real capitalism has real ideological problems, and now just Donald Trump's just rewritten the whole everything. For 3 years we were told, oh, Ukraine is the good guy, Zelensky is the good guy. Now Trump tells us, actually, no, he never was the good guy. You were just told he was the good guy. In fact, he's the bad guy. I mean, this is like Big Brother. It's like 1984. It's everything, or Newspeak, isn't it? It's all, everything means the opposite. It's just what we tell you what it means. But it makes no sense to many people what's currently going on. Supporting the Ukraine war. I mean, an increasing amount of people in Germany could see how idiotic it is, and in polls there was over 50% have always opposed the Ukraine war, and still the German government put billions in. You could see this is not winnable. We knew 2 years ago how it's going to end, didn't we? We knew exactly the deal because they discussed it then, and they're discussing it again now. People can see it. They're being played for fools. And Germans were played for particularly big fools, with billions being pumped into it. They're now changing, and both the conservative leader and the SPD are agreed they want to change the constitution to borrow more money to support Ukraine some more. They still want to continue pumping billions into Ukraine. So a few years ago it was totally idiotic, but they actually put it in the constitution. You can't borrow more money, so you have to always balance the books. I mean, what an idiotic thing to do. It was supposed to win the elections, but it never did. So now they're breaking the constitution so they can pump more money into Ukraine. It's at the moment it's a populist type of, it's mainly waffle, I think. Will they really do it against the wishes of Donald Trump, and for how long? I can't see it will last for very long, but this is more about defending the European Union, isn't it? I mean, Trump has no interest. Talked about this. Trump has no interest in a strong European Union. And in fact, he's now putting two fingers up. He wants to have the European Union as weak as possible, not a competitor, but he doesn't want to rule in the old way of an alliance with Europe, etc. This is now a totally different relationship. There's a relationship of fear, of I'm the sheriff, you're my subjects, keep your head down. What's Europe going to do? That's the huge question. That's a huge question that's going to determine politics in the next few years, really. Is Europe going to stand up? Are they going to roll over? Both have massive implications, and I don't know. I suspect they will sort of come out of Ukraine trying to carry on as before, but it's a hugely situation in flux where anything can happen.
Tina, thank you very much indeed. Really excellent introduction, great discussion, good reply. So much to think about. We certainly are in new waters with Trump's election, and the rise of the far right should give us all cause for concern and make us redouble our efforts so we can do what we can do here to build a Marxist revolutionary communist alternative and assist those elsewhere to do the same. And with that, I'm going to see into the next portion of the meeting, where I'm going to ask Ed Potts from the Talking About Socialism steering group to give a brief report on the latest meeting that we've had in the Forging Communist Unity process. Ed can fill out the background, give a bit of an update, and we'll then open it up and Minnie can ask her question or make her point, and we'll take any other points as well. So Ed, over to you.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, well, comrades may have had a chance to see the update. I'll post it in the chat now, just so that people can save the link for later if they haven't seen it already. We've been participating in discussions, a discussion process involving TAS, the TAS steering group, the weekly worker group, the CPGB, and also now the so-called Unity faction of the Prometheus editorial board. So those comrades among the Prometheus editorial board who want to be involved in this process, which is under the banner Forging Communist Unity. There have been a few meetings so far, all online, although it's envisaged that the next meeting will be in person. And they have been tentative to start with, I think, inevitably, because it takes time to work out, of course, what you're going to discuss and how long it's going to take. I don't think anybody expects it to be a quick process, but for our part in TAS, in the TAS steering group, we're optimistic about the potential of the process because it offers the prospect that those organisations which are currently on the left in this country arguing for a mass communist party, not along the undemocratic lines of the revolutionary organisations which exist, such as the SP and the SWP and so on, but a qualitatively different type of organisation, and we think that there's the prospect for all of us who are making very similar arguments about that through a process of hard work and discussion to reach much greater cooperation and ultimately unity of our organisations. We think that should take the form of a new organisation, a new fused pro-party organisation, which has the potential not simply to be bigger than the organisations that we currently have by adding together the quite small number of members that are involved in each, but to be qualitatively different and attract greater numbers of people to it. We hope it's something that will people will be enthused by, not least, of course, the people who are in this discussion tonight and people elsewhere who have a similar appetite to see an organisation of that kind emerge. The discussion that took place on Sunday just gone was the first really substantive discussion on the subject of programme, which is really where all it's really the first consideration. Everything starts with the politics for us, and everything flows from the politics, and the programme is what sets out the organisation's fundamental principles and the strategy and how it wants to change the world and what it's going to do in order to effect that change. So it all starts with programme, and it's a big topic. What we did in advance of the meeting was we submitted 2 documents to it, which you can read, which are linked to in the post that I've just posted in the chat. It's on the TAS website, talkingabout.socialism.org. You can find it there. There was a shorter document, which was a sort of agreed position of the TAS steering group. I also submitted a longer article, which goes into some of the arguments in a bit more detail, sets out really my sort of personal view on things, and also begins to make a critique of some of the aspects of the CPGB's draft programme, which they, of course, quite understandably put on the table for discussion as their contribution. There was quite a lot of discussion about it, in particular discussion about what level of agreement or acceptance of the programme is required in order to be a member, and what significance that has. I think it's clear from the documents that we submitted that ultimately we do think, as I think everyone present in that meeting thought, that ultimately membership of a communist party or a pro-party organisation should be determined by whether you can accept the programme, because there may well be things in there that you don't agree with, but you think, well, I can live with it, even if it's not quite the way I would put it. But we are making an additional argument, which is especially relevant to the Forging Communist Unity process, which is that it's not enough simply to skip to the end and say, well, look, here's a draft programme, or here's the programme that we have. Would you accept it? And if you would, then the discussion's over. We think that doesn't really cut it. We think that there are a number of organisations with points of unity or programmes or whatever they may be, which we could accept potentially being in if we thought it was important to be in those organisations to pursue a sort of tactical work in there. But that really asks the wrong question. Before we get to the question of, well, what can you live with if you have to? What can you accept? It's necessary to go through a stage before that, which is trying and putting serious effort into working out what we can all agree with. And precisely because we hope to see a new, bigger and better fused organisation emerge from this FCU process, we think one of the key ways to help that and help achieve that is for the organisations involved to put serious effort into collaboratively drafting a new programme which reflects, so far as is possible, the things that those involved agree on before falling back on what we can all accept if agreement isn't possible on any given issue. We think that there's a lot which ends up in programmes and which has ended up in this example in the CPGB's draft programme, which is extraneous to requirements, surplus to requirements. It doesn't belong in a programme. It may be very useful and helpful analysis or commentary, but it doesn't really belong in the programme which we ask members to accept. And so it's an ongoing discussion. Of course, we barely grazed the surface of a lot of this. during the time that we had available on Sunday. We will discuss as long as we need to, ultimately, because we think this is an important process. It has a lot of potential, and we're optimistic about it, and we want to get it right. We've published the 2 documents on the TAS website because we think it's important to be open about what we're arguing. And of course, we welcome your views as well. And we'd like to hear what you think, whether we've argued things in the right way, whether you agree or disagree with us. And so that's why we've done that. So I'll stop there.
Thanks very much, Ed. I'm going to, we don't have a lot of time, and that's inevitably concise and truncated, and it doesn't really begin to even give a flavour of what we discussed. We met for an hour and a half, and really only 4 people were able to contribute significantly to the discussion. Minnie, I'm going to call you in, so fire away.
Thanks, Nick. I'll just be brief. Yeah, I read the documents that have been put online, and I appreciated them. I thought they were good documents, and a lot of them were making me think, especially the position on the petty bourgeoisie under communists coming to power. But one thing that I want to say is the acceptance and agreement thing. So is it the case at this stage that comrades in TAS are the forging communist unity, because there was some sort of difference on the communist CPGB forum, which is online on video, that the forging communist unity comrades, the steering group, the people leading the process from the organizations, is it that they will, the hope is they can come to an agreement on a program, an agreement, and then when it's put to members, that's when it's an acceptance thing. You can accept it. And also one more point, Jack Conrad did say at the CPGB forum, I think he said any new organisation force would have to have the name CPGB, but isn't the very name Great Britain, the Great, is that not an imperialist signifier? Thanks.
Okay, Minnie, great questions, and these are things that we're going to have to grapple with in the course of the discussions. Lawrence, I'm going to call you in very briefly.
Yeah, very briefly, Nick. I agree with Minnie. I thought the discussion around acceptance and agreement is an important one, and I'd definitely like to hear more about that. And I largely agree with the TAS's position on that particular document. The counter argument that I've heard for keeping that lengthy document, that because of the experience of the Soviet Union, we have to have a really long program. I think that's quite false. We definitely need to talk about the Soviet Union and its failures, and that we're not going to follow it. But I don't think you'll solve or win that argument in a program. I think that'll be a much deeper educational theory question. That's it.
Thanks, Lawrence. I'm going to call back Ed in a minute for just 1 minute. I'm just going to put my 2 minutes in. All of these things are up for discussion in the Forging Communist Unity meetings that we have every fortnight. We're going to meet for a whole day in 2 or 3 weeks' time in London. And on Sunday, on yesterday morning, we had Jack Conrad introduced his arguments in favour of the CPGB draft programme for about 20-25 minutes. Ed spoke from TAS for about the same. Mike McNair then spoke, and I spoke, and that was all we were able to do. Jack came back for a few minutes, and so we've only sort of like begun to touch the outlines of agreement and disagreement. And actually, there are. I'm sorry, Soraya. Do you want to come in quickly?
Just very quickly, there's some debate going in, and obviously in the chat, and I'm not suggesting we open that all up, but I do think that the idea is we want to build something bigger, and it's not the small groups getting together and becoming a bit bigger. And so the issue of a name is really important, because if people think, if you keep a name like CPGB, people will think it is the Communist Party of Great Britain, and that will not be A, giving the idea that there's something larger, and B, yeah, I think it's a whole debate. Names are very, very important, and Great Britain and Brittany. I'm afraid that's a bit of historic false argument. If anybody thinks for 1 second that Great Britain isn't imperialist, I'm afraid that's, yeah. I'll be quiet.
Okay, thanks, Soraya. Look, I think the fact that we're trying to get this squashed into 15 minutes is important, but also it's impossible. And even in the discussions and in the document, you can see that it's quite difficult to explain, accept, agree the question of the name, the question of the history, the question of what theory, and so on. And there are differences clearly that are going to emerge more fully in these debates, but we're taking them very seriously. And we're going to do our best to make sure that the differences don't derail the process. And what we've said, and I think this is agreed by everybody, is we'll take as much time as is necessary, but we also want to move quite quickly. And I think Minnie's point brings home that I think in TAS, we need to have our own discussion, in fact, several discussions, so we can thrash out these points about agree, accept, the name. What do we mean by a new organization? Is it going to be a new organization, or is it going to simply be the adherence of a few to another existing organization? All these things we need to spend time, effort, and energy. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to call Ed back very briefly to say a few things in response, but I think they're going well at the moment, and we'll keep putting in our thoughts. Ed.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Well, I'll just conclude by saying the things that comrades are picking on for the discussion, and what does it mean to say socialist rather than communist? All of these are examples of things which happen in the FCU discussions as well, which is that even people who have a lot of political experience and a lot of reading and training behind them, precisely because we've been divided into rival groups, if you like, reproducing and duplicating a lot of the same work, we've come to develop our own traditions and our own ways of speaking about things. And so it's difficult sometimes to understand what somebody else means, and maybe they use the same term in a different way, or they use a different term to mean the same thing. And that's precisely something that we hope we can overcome and reach a great understanding of each other's positions. I don't want to get into all of the substantive points, save to say that on things like the name of the organisation, for example, I think everybody involved agrees that it's ultimately secondary what the name of the organisation is. What's really important is what it is and what it does. And the name is something that, comrades may argue very forcefully for what they think is a good name or a bad name, but ultimately it's secondary. I think I'll leave it there. I encourage comrades to read the documents. I think it's clear from those documents that we're certainly not proposing vetoes or consensus politics or anything of that nature, but you be the judges and tell us what you think about them, and look forward to discussing it further.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ed. Comrades can take time, if comrades take the time to look at the documents, also the CPGB's online communist forum. Jack Conrad gave a report back yesterday, which comrades may find interesting, and certainly reading both sides may provoke further thought, as they clearly have for those of us that are engaged in the discussion. We do have a sort of statement of our own aims and principles, which are part of the ongoing discussion. If you haven't read that, it is on our website. And I just make this last point. We do want people to join TAS. If you haven't joined TAS, then please send us an email through the website on the contact us page, and we'll get in touch with you and discuss it. Because we think this process is extremely important. We want to get as many people involved as possible. The next meeting of talking about socialism is in a fortnight's time. We've got Moshe Makova is going to give his views on the latest developments in the Middle East. I think Moshe is always welcome at these meetings, a very popular speaker. The fortnight after that, we've got Owen Miller, who is an academic at SOAS, a specialist in Southeast Asia and particularly in Korea. He's going to do a talk on the recent tumultuous events in Korea. And then we'll be thinking about a new program. And I imagine that the talking about, the forging communist unity process is going to have to feature more regularly, and perhaps give over a lot more time than we've been able to tonight or at the last meeting. With that, I'm going to say thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you're new to the meetings, I hope you especially enjoyed it. Please come back, and we'll see you all in a fortnight's time. Good night.